Welcome to the Fictional American channel. Today we're going to dive into an intriguing question. Why is the Lula government so attentive to the return of Donald Trump, and what could be the impacts of this on Latin America and, of course, Brazil? Believe me, this is a subject that goes far beyond politics, directly affecting the economy, international relations, and even the future of your pocket. So don't miss any detail in this video. Each point is essential to understanding the scenario that could unfold in the coming months. Take the opportunity to leave your like now and subscribe to the channel. That way, you help our content reach more people and you'll always be up to date with the most relevant topics for Brazil and the world. So, let's talk about how the Lula government is apparently very worried about Donald Trump. According to recent statements by Brazilian diplomats, Trump's agenda for Latin America is a cause for great concern. Is the concern really for the region? No, it's the left-wing governments who need to worry, because Trump's return to the US presidency could and will represent a complicated scenario for them. From the moment Trump won the election in 2016, the left has shown signs of unease, although it tries to disguise it. The reality, however, is that there is a palpable fear about the impact that a leader like Trump could have on Latin American geopolitics. This nervousness was evident when Brazilian congressmen began to seek support in the US, denouncing domestic political issues and exposing the weaknesses of local leaderships. A clear example of this is the concern of left-wing leaders about the immigration policies defended by Trump. But is this the real reason? It doesn't seem so. The immigration narrative has been used as a distraction. What really keeps leftist governments awake is the political and economic agenda that Trump could implement to undermine their influence for leaders like Lula and Nicolas Maduro. The strengthening of the right in Latin America would be a major blow, capable of shaking already fragile structures. Here in Brazil, we see ministers talking about suspending visas and increasing the repression of opposition voices. But these measures could lose momentum in the face of a scenario in which Trump returns to the White House. His direct approach and support for conservative policies are an incentive for opponents of authoritarian regimes throughout Latin America. In addition, Trump's possible return revisits a larger debate about the relationship between the United States and Latin America. While leftist governments argue against American imperialism, many ignore the fact that they depend heavily on US markets and policy. Honduras, for example, has already shown concern about the remittances sent by immigrants, which represent a significant slice of the local economy. If Trump tightens immigration rules, economic instability in Central America could increase, putting more pressure on governments in the region. But perhaps the most relevant point is how Trump could influence the global right-wing movement. Since his victory in 2016, he has served as a symbol for conservative leaders and parties around the world. His alliance with Jair Bolsonaro, for example, has consolidated a political front that openly challenges the progressive values promoted by international organizations and left-wing governments. For the Lula government, the challenge is not just diplomatic, but strategic. Brazil's economic management, marked by policies that have already proved outdated, puts the country in a vulnerable position in a scenario of external crisis. If Trump decides to pressure governments in the region with economic sanctions or political retaliation, Brazil could face significant difficulties in sustaining its domestic agenda and its influence in Latin America. In Brazil, the Lula government seems to be stuck in the past, reviving policies that have already proven ineffective decades ago. By trying to boost the economy with state spending, the current administration is repeating the mistakes made during the military when unbridled public investment led to uncontrolled inflation and a fragile economic system. While such policies may have worked in a specific context in the early 2000s, today they sound obsolete in the face of a globalized, interconnected world marked by rapid technological and financial transformations. The attempt to sustain economic growth through state-owned companies and widespread subsidies ignores the lessons of past crises, managing public resources as if they were unlimited. Instead of encouraging entrepreneurship and innovation, ends up perpetuating a dependence on the state that stifles the private sector and Brazil's competitiveness on the international stage. In addition, the government's monetary policy, often aimed at artificially controlling the exchange rate and inflation, has created unsustainable pressure on the central, which is already burning foreign exchange reserves to contain fluctuations in the dollar. This strategy puts Brazil in a vulnerable position, especially in times of global uncertainty. With rising international interest rates and a generalized economic slowdown, the government's ability to finance its policies becomes limited. If a new external crisis occurs, such as a shock in the commodities market or instability in partner countries, the impact on Brazil could be devastating. Donald Trump's return to the White House, if it materializes, represents a new challenge for left-wing leaders in Latin America. During his previous term, Trump made clear his disinterest in supporting socialist regimes and adopted measures that weakened governments such as those in Cuba and Venezuela. If Trump decides to once again apply economic sanctions or cut aid to countries that support anti-American policies, this could further destabilize these regimes. Venezuela, led by Nicolás Maduro, is a classic example of how economic dependence on foreign resources makes these governments vulnerable. Without the subsidies and partnerships that sustain their economy, authoritarian regimes in the region face increasing difficulties in maintaining political control. No wonder Maduro and other leaders of the Latin American left are apprehensive about Trump's return to the US presidency. For Brazil, the repercussions of this scenario could be direct and indirect. Trump, who has shown sympathy for strengthening conservative movements, could use his influence to economically isolate left-wing governments. This would hinder access to international resources and increase pressure on the Lula government, which is already facing internal criticism for its economic decisions. In addition, the strengthening of the right in Latin America with leaders such as Javier Milei in Argentina and other emerging movements represents a direct contrast to Lula's policies. The vision of a continent divided between conservative and progressive agendas puts Brazil in an uncomfortable position. By insisting on outdated policies, the government not only weakens itself internally, but also loses relevance in the regional debate. To survive this environment, the government will need to review its strategies. Persisting with the same model could lead to drastic economic and political consequences. The risk lies not only in external pressure, but also in growing internal dissatisfaction. The population, faced with an unstable economic scenario, could become increasingly critical of Lula's leadership, especially if unpopular measures are needed to correct the mistakes made. With Trump's return, the impact will be profound, not just for Brazil, but for the whole of Latin America, where the battle between right and left will intensify. It remains to be seen whether Lula will be able to adapt his policies to this new scenario, or whether he will continue to bet on a model that is increasingly proving to be unsustainable. The question that remains is, how far can this concern take left-wing governments in an attempt to protect their position? For Lula and other leaders, the next few months will be crucial, and the decisions taken now could determine the political future of the region. Thanks for watching the video so far. So, leave your comment below, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and see you next time.